morning, everyone. Thanks for attending a breakout session. I'm one of the principals of Network Outsource. Jim Woods is my partner. He's our Chief Technology Officer. And we started the company in 1996. We started working with schools in 1998 and really started to get involved heavily in the education market. We were introduced to a school in 98, back when the overhead projectors, and we deployed Windows 95 and Windows 98, and more analog network. And we've seen the growth within about 3 or 4 years. We were working with over 100 schools and really moved forward with the digital age of technology integration. And our main focus of our company is working with educators in schools. We're fortunate to have Eric Simpson here today with us. He's the Vice President of SPC International. He's a renowned speaker and author, and he's going to speak on effective technology management. Eric?
Thanks, Adam. Good morning, everyone. How you guys doing this morning? My name is Eric Simpson, and my background is in, first of all, in corporate IT. So I have a lot of experience in building out call centers and service desks for Fortune 1000 organizations. Then we started our own IT practice in 1997. Evolved that in 2005 as one of the first pure play managed service providers in Southern California. The practice was acquired in 2007. And our organization now assists folks just like you understand technology and how to make best use of technology. So we've written a few books, and as a thank you for your attendance at the Asset Conference and visiting our booth and this session, we're going to send you out a digital download of the best NOC and service desk operations book ever that we authored to give you guys some insight and your teams a little insight into how best to utilize effective incident management, prioritization, and addressing needs from a day-to-day service desk and operations perspective. So I'd like to start today's session sharing with you some of the topics, your unique challenges as an IT director today, which are much, much different in today's world than they were even 10 years ago, as we all know that. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some alternatives that you can consider to try to deliver the most effective information technology services to your school, to your districts, and to your users in classrooms. We're going to talk about some solutions and have a little bit of a Q&A. And we're going to have an interview with Director of Instructional Technology and the District Network Administrator of Central Islip Public Schools with us this morning. And then we'll have a little bit of Q&A. And I don't like to have a speaker-led presentation. I like it to be a little bit interactive. So just let me know among you who is not going to raise their hand no matter what question I ask this morning. Just give me the secret wink, so don't let me down, so I just know. Okay, just kidding. As I mentioned, technology has changed a lot. We've gone from the analog age to the digital age. Remember when things were a little bit simpler? Remember when it was all about handing out books, getting that blue ink on your fingers? I remember that, running those machines that would copy paper. We've all gone to digital now. It's a lot different. So now we have a lot more responsibility. And how do we maintain our strategic vision? How do we look to the future? Who do we rely on to feed us with new ideas and things like that? So it's great that we have Philip Voigt this morning from Central Islip, who's going to share a little bit of what he's been able to do in the Q&A session. Now, this is pretty much what's happened. This is the effect of technology, the advancement of technology. And it's really tough to stay abreast of it. I mean, for anyone, without having the support of strategic advisors and to spend the time to learn about all these things. As a matter of fact, that's the number one component that I put up here as one of your challenges. Would you all agree to that? Say aye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right, nobody winked at me. That was great. Awesome. We're off to a good start. Teams, managing teams, building teams, leading teams, measuring performance. The HR aspect of that is is a challenge. Technology, obviously, we're talking about that this morning. Vendors can sometimes be challenging when we haven't figured out the best way to interact with our vendors. Would you guys agree with that? Say aye. Aye? Yeah, it's a little bit challenging. How do we keep our vendors in the loop? How do they keep us in the loop? How do we communicate best with them? How do we measure performance? How do we establish KPIs? How do we set expectations and reset expectations? Sometimes we set expectations, but then things change and we're not as fast as we need to be to reset the expectations on both sides of the table. And then that's when we start having hiccups. Would you all agree? Say yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then budgets, right? The big one. So I'm just going to talk about 5 real quick this morning before we get into some Q&A. So time is the big one, right? Managing your teams, managing projects, managing your technology, the vendors, and the budgets. I mean, who has the time? And it seems like today, and especially here, I mean, everything is so fast. Everything is so compressed. I'm from Southern California, and LA is very fast-paced. Orange County is a little bit, it's still fast-paced, a little bit slower. San Diego, I don't know what's going on down there with those folks. Everything's just laid back. It's a party. It's like, we're going to get to it. It just seems like, but here, I grew up here in New York, so I know it is like, we want it yesterday, and we have no patience because we don't have time. Is that right? None. So it's tough. The team. To me, leading people is a lot tougher than managing technology. How many of us agree? Say aye.
Aye.
It's tough. It's tough. Managing all these teams and managing the different components of HR and performance and keeping our teams informed as to what the strategic direction is and making sure that we're providing them the tools and the training that we need to help them move the ball forward and sharing our strategic vision with them, getting them trained, and how do we keep them utilized and efficient. And sometimes it's not their fault that they fall behind, it's our fault because we simply don't have the time to really lead them. It's happened to me. You know, it happens to everyone. So it's very, very tough. And then, of course, that's going to affect the end users, right? Who does that impact the worst? So that's really tough. And then the technology challenges, I think we're all here at the Asset Conference because we're trying to figure out ways to improve our outcomes in some of these areas. You know, it's tough having the resources and the availability for projects and initiatives. Who has time to tweak and tune internal tools and develop new processes and hold people accountable to meeting those processes and those expectations? Technical expertise for technologies such as STEAM, cloud, mobility, virtualization, security, you name it. Remember that one slide I showed at the beginning where everything is just kind of jumping out at you? There's a lot going on. And then, of course, the challenges with these one-to-one initiatives where it's very labor-intensive to deploy and manage, right? And then report on how things are going. We're juggling a lot of balls. The vendor challenges, right? How do you choose a great strategic vendor? You know, there's a lot of things that we need to think about. You know, the value that they bring to the relationship, their expertise, their performance and availability, accountability. How many of us have had some challenges in the past? Keeping our vendors accountable and then them keeping us accountable. I think we've all had that challenge. You don't have to raise your hand. Wink at me. Secret handshake. Cool. Processes and reporting. How do you keep communication and visibility, right? As a team with our vendors, because we can't do it by ourselves. We know that. And the more complex the technology becomes, the less able we are to keep our hands on all of it. So we have to identify our good strategic partners, and we have to build communication strategies and reporting processes to maintain visibility. And then we have to keep each other accountable. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And of course, what kind of strategic value do they bring? Are they bringing you solutions all the time, or are you having to always reach out to them? You know, those are considerations. And how do we fix that? You know, sometimes it's just the communication, a dialogue. You know, the vendors are just as busy as we are, right? So how do they know who needs the help? We have to communicate and we have to maintain visibility. We have to have a communication process that works for everyone. You know, everyone's an independent individual. Some folks don't respond well to email or good follow-up. Maybe they need some other process or structure, face-to-face communication. I love having strategic meetings. But there has to be an agenda, and there has to be an outcome, and there has to be some takeaways, and everyone has to be responsible to execute after that and to communicate back the process. And of course, we're all busy. And we have to hold each other accountable in order to work together as a team. And then, of course, cost, the big issue. I've let the budget for the last point. I don't have to go through every point on this slide. There's probably a dozen other points that we could talk about. This is very, very challenging, especially when we're talking about ancillary costs that we don't think about, or that we're mandated to deploy some things and we don't think, oh, there's going to be some additional infrastructure costs if we're deploying these access points or this mesh or this VDI solution, right? Unfunded mandates. It's tough when we're in a position where we have to figure out how to piece together budget, how to borrow from here and trade from there, and then not to feel stressed and to overwork our internal teams. So it's really difficult. Anyone else have any challenges that you guys are experiencing that I didn't cover in these top 5? Would you say that did I leave something out? Am I hitting the mark here? Can I have some feedback?
In education, you don't have the luxury of corporate, where in larger corporations where you may have a few people that will have the same skill set. So when Johnny is out or gets a better offer and goes somewhere else, Sam can pick up the load for a little while until he gets going. Whereas in education, it's like one person holds the bag for everything. So if that person goes anywhere or is not available, it's a huge problem, because districts just do not have the financial means to, I'll give you SCCM, for example, in Windows 8, Windows environment. Districts just cannot afford, in Long Island anyhow, because there's a school district every 5 miles, okay, as opposed to down in the Carolinas where there's 50,000 kids in one school district.
Sure.
Which is why we really depend on places like BOCES. You can't afford to hire this guy to be, or woman, to be the expert in Hyper-V and the expert in the database management. And so therefore, I'm starting to sense from a management perspective, we're really becoming an inch deep and a mile wide versus the other way around, which is the total opposite of what it really should be. You can skim it a little bit, you can only go so far with that. But if you need to go beyond that, it's a real problem.
No, that's excellent feedback, because how do you compete for the best talent? And when you bring someone on board, typically they're going to learn the technologies that you have in place, but aren't really experienced with other technologies. And like you say, if there's a sick leave or vacation or some situation where the folks that you have brought on board that are your best talent now get hired away, and now you have to deal with this attrition, it's very, very difficult. And so what you end up with is, a core of probably loyal, trusted staff, as long as you can keep them.
Right.
But they can only get so deep into the technology because you're juggling so many balls, and they have to be everything to everyone.
That's exactly right.
Thank you so much. So what are the alternatives, right? Obviously doing nothing isn't the right answer. But in some cases, that's what some of us have done, is just kind of, we'll deal with that later, Maybe that hasn't really come back to hurt us, but I think it certainly will. That may be your costliest option. Fixing it yourself, well, we try that, but we've just heard great feedback about the challenges of trying to deploy our own internal resources to address some of these issues. Outsource is an option, but maybe not 100% of a solution. So let's kind of explore some of those items here. And I'm not going to go through every sentence on these slides, but when you outsource, here are a couple things that we've learned in outsourcing. First of all, select the relationships that provide you the best strategic value. Because let's face it, Anyone can break fix a PC, anyone can troubleshoot a network, but at the end of the day, what you really need in order to stop juggling all these balls is someone that can be strategic, that can bring you the solutions so you can spend time where you need to spend the time. And trust that person or organization to bring you that expertise. So there's strategic value, and when there's strategic value, you can regain some of the time back that you're having to spend being that strategic resource and trying to deal with things and putting out fires. That reactive firefighter aspect of our jobs that can overrun us, as we know. Team. We heard about having a team that is not quite as capable as we would like as compared to the corporate world. How many of us have corporate IT experience? Okay, so a few of us, right? So we know, well, now corporate has also changed in the last 10, 15 years. I mean, when I was in corporate IT, it was a whole different ballgame. We had the best tools, the best technology, the best people. We could compete. That's also changed now, right? So the business world has changed. IT has changed, technology has changed, but we still have to compete for those same resources. So if you can outsource some of that team function to an outsource provider, they can take care of the noise. Now let's talk about that, because when you're outsourcing components of your responsibility, what is the most noisy aspect of day-to-day IT operations? I will submit to you that's probably tier 1 service requests. Tier 1 and tier 2 service requests comprise up to 95% of all help desk service requests. These are statistics in the industry. So about 90% of your service requests are going to be tier 1 issues. These are the user issues. I can't print, I can't get to the internet, my email's not working, right? My projector isn't functioning, those types of things. That's noise. You don't need a tier 3 specialist to deal with those things. But in your scenario, if you're dealing with these things yourself, your technicians and support staff have to be tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, and deploy projects, and run initiatives, and do all of these things. So tier 1 and tier 2, and just escalate tier 3 to your team, that kind of makes sense. Because if you do that, you can reduce up to 95% of that noise through an outsourced provider, okay? Sick leave doesn't quite become such an issue, and the expertise that an outsourced provider brings can also help you rely on them to develop that expertise so you don't have to build it yourself, and redeploy your teams to be the most effective for your initiatives and for your day-to-day operations and strategic vision. And technology, so relying on an outsourced provider to deliver much of the technology on a subscription basis, as we're seeing more and more providers move to now, makes a lot of sense, because now we're taking these capital expenditures that we're used to having to get budget approval for and a long authorization process and finding that budget money for, and moving it to an operating expense perspective, which may make it easier for some of us to roll that in, especially when we're bringing labor in along with services. And there can be some other advantages as well. So that's really good. Budgets are strained. So how can you identify a great solution through some outsourced relationships when you're looking at it from an ROI perspective and from a budgetary perspective? If you really are effective at working with the right strategic partner, you can typically bring some of those costs down, or at least create a scenario where you're not experiencing these peaks and valleys of cost and cost overruns. Flatline that, get into a situation with an outsourced provider that can provide you some sort of a monthly fixed fee budget that'll allow you now to forecast and plan much more effectively. And then again, hitting that strategic value of the vendor relationship. You really want that smart vendor relationship, not just someone that's a firefighter, but someone that can sit down with you from a strategic perspective and meet with you to discuss process and discuss communication and hold meetings with them to make certain that your goals are aligned and they understand the vision, and that you're helping them help you from a strategic perspective across the table. Because sometimes you don't come up with the answer until you have those strategic meetings. You think you have a need, you have a pain, and these external resources can bring you insights from what's happening or what's working with other districts, other schools, or other new technologies, because they're working with these vendors much more closely than you are in many cases, right? And of course, they're the ones that can filter that vendor that keeps wanting to, push the next new technology to you. They can say, well, wait a minute, we've looked at this, we might pilot it, or there's a different technology, or it's not quite ready for prime time. But we've all been on the other side of the table and the vendor's telling us something completely different. And we love our vendors, right? They've got a job to do too. But sometimes we need that strategic resource to kind of lead us by the hand through some of these decisions. So a couple of just quick 3 things that I thought make the most sense and what we've seen in the industry for school districts and candidly other organizations moving toward what can they outsource from an internal IT perspective include help desk, the tier 1 and tier 2, keep the tier 3, the high visibility, and you may even say, well, when this particular user, maybe it's superintendent or a principal of the school or someone, when they open a ticket, escalate that to us right away. Don't put it through the normal process. Let's treat those a little bit special. So reduce the noise as much as possible. Projects and initiatives that you don't have the internal resources or expertise, or even the ability to be as efficient in deploying and maintaining those, would be high on the list of thinking about outsourcing. And then staff augmentation. Do you have the need to have folks on site a day a week, a couple of days a week, or maybe every day? Or maybe vacation coverage, emergency sick leave, or project deployment. I want to roll out this project, we're doing it internally, but we could use an additional hand or 2. Think about those areas in terms of what makes sense. Prioritize what's your highest pain, and then enter into a relationship, pilot that a little bit till you feel comfortable about it, and then begin to expand it as it makes sense. So getting the most out of the relationship. This is an area that sometimes is elusive. What I've found is the best way to engage with an outsourced provider is to understand and treat them as part of your team. I've seen so many cases where an internal service desk will call the third-party strategic partner service desk their service desk. They keep doing this. You've got to stop doing that. It's our service desk, because at the end of the day, who suffers? It's our users, it's our students, it's our teachers, it's our schools, our districts. So we have to understand that it is a team effort, that it's our service desk. And you have to treat it as if they're right down the hall. Have weekly meetings, go through incident management reports, figure out why things keep getting escalated back. In my experience, the number 1 reason that tickets get escalated back to an internal service desk from a strategic provider is because they don't have enough information to deal with that issue. So make sure when you're onboarding your students and classes and teachers, or schools and teachers, that you provide all of the information that the outsourced service desk needs. And work with them on a week-by-week basis. Have a scheduled call to go through incidents and look at ways for you to improve. Why was this ticket open for so long? Measure SLA and keep everyone accountable. Communication is key, and develop a culture of transparency and accountability. And what are the metrics? What are your SLAs? Make sure that we're measuring those. Those are the key performance metrics, or however it is that you measure performance and what you have to be held to for satisfaction. So those are some of the key points that I wanted to share this morning in terms of, challenges, some alternatives, and then, if we're going to outsource, here are some insights that I'd like you to think about as we move forward. Any questions or comments? Adam?
Jim, would you like to?
Sure. So when we had the opportunity to present today at Asset, we realized that Eric is probably one of the industry leaders who we really find the most valuable information from. And we figured what better way to pair the information that he had to impart than to talk about a little bit of real world experience with a client that we value very highly, Philip Voigt, who is the tech director at Central Islip. He's also the music director at Central Islip. He is the president-elect of Scamia, and he's had about 6 concerts over the last 7 nights, but he's still standing and excited. Phil is a technology visionary, but he's an educator first. He started as a music teacher, and he always has that in mind when he evaluates technologies. Phil will roll up his sleeves and get in there and code, and he's produced apps for his district. He's very engaged in some cloud services that he's found to deliver content and help to administrate within the district. He has iPads rolled out for several years now. He's using a Jamf management platform for those. He has a Windows 8 pilot program going on. He has System Center Configuration Manager rolled out back to the 2007 version and then straight through to 2012 as well, using that for Microsoft Endpoint, and a Windows 8 rollout that's going on right now where teachers are volunteering to try Windows 8, 8.1, now that Microsoft's gotten it pretty usable. Really he has quite a bit going on, and he's somebody that we found to find good vendor relationships and make good use of them, and we hope he can share his experiences this morning.
Come on up, Phil. Sure. Round of applause for Phil,
My evaluation was next month, so.
please. The hardest working man in IT, it sounds like. Jim, have a seat. I've got a few questions. So I'd love to take some of your Q&A, but I also have prepared a couple of questions to kind of kick off the Q&A session. So the first question was, what are your responsibilities in the district? I think, Jim, what else are you not doing?
When they moved me up, if it has a plug, it somehow became my job.
You're the universal connector.
Yes.
I see. Very good, very good. So I spoke a lot in today's session about the value of the strategic relationship with an outsourced vendor. Can you elaborate on that and how you really use the relationship between Central Islip and Network Outsource to achieve a higher level of understanding and communication from a strategic level and planning?
Your first couple slides, especially about time, management, and what you were talking about with the levels of that, what you called noise, was beautiful. Because ever since I've been deeply involved with Jim and the team there, that noise has somehow gone away. And the wonderful things Jim said, and I do appreciate those wonderful, that's because I have time to sometimes just sit there and react to new. Where before I was very involved and had such a great team in place and such great communication, all that noise took over my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
I run the music department there as well, and I know that that's a separate, but that took a lot away from what I was doing there because of the noise. And I love that word you use. It popped with me. I meet with Jim and my team once a week, and over the last I'd say 3 or 4 years, it has gone from micromanage, where I needed to know everything because I needed to make sure everything was getting done, where now all that level 1, 2 triage, I call it triage. You had another wonderful word for it, but I don't worry about it anymore. I don't even get involved. And the project management of when I get these brain buster, go try this, I almost feel bad because I throw it at them. But the key to that is the communication, and we'll get together and we have such an honest, I love Jim as a service provider because he will tell me when I'm out of my mind, when something is not, or maybe that it's not going to work, but it's not just jumping in the deep end, it's jumping in the deep end with cinder blocks, because the amount of management, that goes into not having a plan in place. So your first couple slides about the time, communication seems to be, for me, what does it all. And I do have an outsourced service provider. I use Network Outsource. They're my I have an in-district team, So I had gone with, you had mentioned, a full-time support. Well, they are my full-time support, but I also use their help desk. But not one teacher in Central High School call it their help desk. It is my help desk. It's just branded with Network Outsource and their employees. But our staff in the district, they're our staff. It is a team approach, but it's all your first slides about time and communication, that's the whole winning ticket for a service provider.
That's great that you've been able to realize, that through the relationship. And how do you, so when you communicate with your Central Islip team in regards to Network Outsources team, right? How do you share the vision? How do you deploy projects? I mean, is it a point where everyone knows that they're an extension of your organization? How easy is it for you to communicate back and forth and for your team to work with Jim's team?
Well, Jim's team is my team.
Okay.
It's not Jim's team, it's my team. And Jim is a member of our team.
I love
We
that.
kind of share that. They are in the district all the time. I have one of Jim's, which my team, but for now I'll say it's Jim's team. One guy who kind of serves as the leader.
So you're on Jim's team now?
Yes, now I'm on Jim's
Gotcha.
team. 4
Just
seconds
clarify.
ago, it was my team.
Gotcha.
I have one guy who I consider more of a leader, more of a manager, more of a mini-me, where every day he's calling me, talking to me. And it's not micromanagement. I hate micromanagement. And I hate being on the side of it where I need to micromanage because I don't want to read all that junk. But he reports to me, especially like you had said, you set up if the superintendent calls, I need to know. The principal calls, I need to know. If the whole high school, went down, I kind of need to know that information because they're not going to call the help desk. They're going to call me.
Right.
So when those situations come up, right away. But you open with projects, and right away, the first time I get a brain buster, or I'll leave Asset now with probably 1,600 ideas of what I want to go do tomorrow, and I'll call him in, I'll say, this is what I saw, boom, 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 and I'll flood his brain, and he'll come back on Thursday and say, okay, right now we could probably do this, so let's try that, and then they calm me down. We make lists and come up with timelines and plans, and what's a summer project, what's a now project, what's a project that has to be a vacation because the teachers can't be around because we're going to make a mess of everything. And and that's the kind of stuff that keeps me, focused.
Gotcha. Thanks. It sounds like you have really good communication, and in my experience, that can only come from having trust and transparency. It sounds like you have a very high level of trust with Network
Absolutely.
Outsource. That's good. And because I've been involved in other situations before where there's been that lack of I'm not really sure. Have our outsource relationships let us down here and there? Sure. Everyone makes mistakes, but in my experience, it's how you deal with that, not what happened. It's how you deal with that. So, that's also a consideration. When you're evaluating your existing relationships and maybe looking for new relationships, it's understanding when you're sitting down to engage with a new relationship. What is the game plan? What are the rules of engagement? How are we going to get notified when something goes wrong? How do we address that? So that communication and risk management strategy has to be seamless between all parties in order for this to be very effective. I think you really you covered all the questions that I've had. I'd like to open it up to the attendees for any specific questions that you might have for Phil or Jim, please.
Hey Phil, whoever we replace, what internal district staff do you have on your team?
You mean
For IT support?
Central ISO staff, not
Yes.
Network Outsource?
Correct, your
Just me.
district, what's central ISO
Yeah,
infrastructure, human infrastructure do you have to
Just
support?
me.
Just you, so
Just me.
when Mrs. Smith's printer in room 10 in the elementary room has
Well,
a problem, how
The
do you
rest is
handle?
outsourced. My team is outsourced. My team is Jim's team.
Okay, so your IT support staff is all outsourced,
Correct.
okay.
And we work on all levels with organizations that have internal teams, organizations that rely on us for certain areas, or in the case of Phil, right down to the ticketing system we provide. So all of the users enter tickets directly into our ticketing system, and we're able to respond and escalate. As Phil said, if the superintendent's affected or the high school's down, it goes right to him.
How long have you had full outsourcing support staff?
They were, I moved up in 2006,
6, okay.
and they were there, I inherited, which was a wonderful inheritance,
Okay.
their support, but you came in 2002?
Correct.
So as a teacher, when I was teaching at Central Islip, I had
You were one of the
experience.
customers, yeah.
I was a customer, yeah.
And you, and Jim, you deploy monitoring and management agents to all the critical devices, so you're patching it up, and you have eyes on the network all the time, so this is another thing that Phil doesn't have to worry about, correct?
Correct. So rather than having to build an internal management platform, we've built out a management platform that we provide to our clients. So we leverage that, and we're able to provide all of those services directly to Phil as a web interface that he can go into to look at tickets, history. He can look at particular users. He can look at servers.
So they're your first line of defense for imaging, SCCM, pushing out an image. So this fellow here with his staff is you having those engineers doing it, as well as my printer doesn't work and things like
Same,
that.
yeah, it's like you had said before, you know, when we don't have the luxury of having an expert here, an expert
Right.
there, so they are the line. You know, and every technician has their own gifts, you know,
Right.
and, you know, maybe this one's better at imaging. So when we talk about imaging
Right,
projects,
that's what I'm talking about, each
we'll do
person.
them.
You know, the person who's a guru on the SCCM on, let's say, for Hyper-V, it's just not enough hours in the day to be able to get to the level that you should get to.
Right, it's just, what do I need to fix right now, I'll just let him know.
But then you've been around for a long time, but there's union issues when you outsource everything. So that's another whole separate ball of wax,
That's a separate session, we'll talk about
Yeah,
that.
very
Well,
real
did you have
though.
another comment here?
I'm actually just looking at, for a different respect, I don't work in an IT department in our district, but do your students bring their own devices into school?
I don't have the wireless infrastructure right now to allow everyone to bring their own devices, so I provide devices.
And
Do
how
they-
many of your students have, how many students are in your district?
6,000,
And how many,
6,500.
and how many have devices?
Of their own? Of
That
the
you
personal or
provide to them? Because students can't walk into the building with their own computer, correct, for school?
They could, they're just not gonna get on the network to use it.
Right, so it's because you don't have the infrastructure to do that, is that correct?
I don't
You
wanna
have the
pull the
bandwidth.
trigger on bringing 6,000 devices in the network yet.
No,
It's just,
I
I'm
would've-
reading a lot and I'm finding that to be a big hindrance. We're all talking about technology and students having access, but then they pretty much all have their own devices, which they then use at home, for the continuity, and we don't allow the students to do that. And not just your district, many districts, and I'm just kind of wondering where is that question? Who would deal with that question?
that auxiliary course that you're talking about, they all have their own personal devices, but you need to be able to manage if you put an announcement out there, hey kids, you guys can bring in your devices and then no one can connect or you bring your existing network down, you now have a bigger problem that's what
You have to
happened,
build separate
A
VLAN for them.
wireless infrastructure is hundreds of thousands of dollars. So who do you wanna lay off to do that?
Well, and
If you
there's,
don't get the funding,
Right.
or if you don't plan it out, it could cost you easy $500,000.
I know, but I think it's time that it has to be brought up for discussion. I don't think it's
Yeah.
any more you can say,
it's
you
here.
just can't do it.
Right?
It's
Oh,
here.
I've
How
been
do we-
discussing
That's
that
a
for
board
10
member,
years.
right?
It's-
Yeah,
it's
it's
really-
here, how do we deal with it, and how do we deal with risk and security and access to, it's a big,
There's a lot of money.
yeah, it's
So
a
what
big
venue
topic.
does that get discussed in?
Board
If I
meeting,
could speak to
Yes.
an example,
gonna say, yeah.
if Natasha Zublianis from Comswag is here with us this morning. We talk about unfunded mandates, we talk about how you have to perform. Natasha was given the task over a summer in September, we're gonna roll out 600 Chromebooks, and then or 900, right? And then about 2 weeks before school started, you know what, while we're at it, let's just do BYOD. Everybody can bring whatever they want. And we literally saw 2,000 devices, personal devices, jump on the network the first morning it was up.
From start to finish, Jim, how long did that take for you guys to design, architect it, deploy it, and light it up?
Probably February, we started the selection process. March or April, we started the planning. We did the deployment throughout the summer. And in September, But there's a
But
superintendent.
There is a lot of difficulty with it, because a lot of the machines that come in, they have their own virus scanning, they have their own firewalls, and they're trying to connect to your network, and you don't know what they put on their machine.
Exactly.
So I can literally spend an hour on that machine alone, just trying to disable everything that they have on their machine, just to make that one machine connect. So, and you have a child that then goes on all those fun little gaming sites, and you can only imagine what's on there.
Natasha, what are you using for filter?
WatchGuard.
Yep, we're using WatchGuard.
WatchGuard?
So we provide several different networks. There's a guest network, there's a student network, there's an educational network, and
Right.
an administrative
So
network.
you have all the different wireless that we have one too.
Exactly.
So, but that's, so you do that in-house or outsource?
That was with their assistants.
And that's where we talked about a project.
That was a project that I contacted Network Outsource for, and they helped us with the wireless and so forth. We had several vendors come in, gave them their suggestions and so forth, and we went with Network Outsource. And,
Are you happy you did it?
yeah, it's a lot of work, but yes.
Okay.
Well, it's one of those, you're being forced into it.
Yeah.
You're being forced
Yeah,
into
no
it, so.
choice,
Yeah.
Right. Are there any other comments or questions for the panel, for Phil or for Jim?
So the district dedicated the financial resources to put the proper wireless infrastructure in place in order to meet that project.
We're still going. We're still ongoing. We're moving some of the Chromebooks from the middle school up to the high school and dedicating it all at the high school at this point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the middle school is still a little bit, taking their time with moving forward with the Chromebooks and so forth.
You mean instructional use of it? Yeah, so you take, you're gonna give it to your 10th graders and up now?
Now the 8th graders are taking it with them into 9th grade.
Okay, yeah.
It was 8th, 9th, and 10th that had them, so, it's, and that's a whole nother ball.
So basically start when they're in first grade and then you'll know what they have.
They might not be enrolled by the time they're done.
No, I know, but you can at least work on the viruses.
Some of them are broken, and they could be broken literally that day, and now what do you do? And you're expected to have extra
Oh, yeah.
power cords, extra Chromebooks laying around. Well, how do you have the manpower to even have somebody run to that room and do that? You could be in the middle of a conference call or in the middle of and somebody's knocking saying, my Chromebook's broken, could I have another one? So the BYOD is a challenge.
I think there's a contrast in the two approaches. And to the high level question of who makes the decision, it's different from district to district, but when a superintendent says,
Guess what?
make it happen, we make it happen, Phil is taking a very measured approach in that he rolls out an iPad cart. That cart has an access point on it, which has enough coverage, so he knows he can wheel that into a room, plug it in, all those devices
So it's
will be
very
covered.
local. I got that.
Exactly.
That's a very, right, that's a local, one area.
Control.
Right, exactly. It's not, you're
Until
just
the
walking
day my
around the
superintendent
halls.
loses his mind and puts me in the
Yeah.
position that Natasha's in, and then I will call Natasha and
Yeah, she's
cry.
sweating balls,
But,
right.
I mean, if I lit that up now, my wireless network would handle it, would be very, I would be nervous. I'd be very nervous, but I think it could do it.
Well, every need, has a different solution, right? Natasha's need is very different from your need today.
Absolutely.
And the solutions that Network Outsource has delivered reflect that. You have a solution that allows you to get what you need, right, but not to open up BYOD. Natasha was like, let's go, February, by the time class started again, boom. Wow, now you're dealing with, of course, those unknowns now, after it's deployed. How do we tweak and tune? How do we, build process that we didn't think about? Because now it's live in the environment.
Exactly, and rolling
Right.
back certain things and,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
Fun.
folks,
WatchGuard again? WatchGuard?
Yes.
help me thank Jim and Phil for coming up.